Hello, and welcome to the Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit's Continuity of Education Support video. Today, we are going to be focusing on effective instruction as part of the Roadmap for Educational Leaders series provided by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Within this component, today's video will explore instruction, instructional planning, and instructional delivery. My name is Eric Leck, and I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction and Educational Technologies at Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit 21. As we focus on quality instructional cycles, we know that planning and delivery of instruction is of primary importance during any school year. But during the 2020-2021 school year, the opportunities and challenges that have been presented by the school shutdowns in the spring of 2020, as well as the varied instructional delivery scenarios that are occurring within our schools, creates a new emphasis on this instructional cycle. As we consider some major components of the instructional cycle, like assessment, analysis, interpretation, instruction, reflection, and monitoring and sharing, we will talk about ways that we can continue this process in a way that helps us to prepare students and continue their education in the best way possible moving forward in this 2021 school year and beyond, being considerate of things that have occurred in the past. As we move forward and we start beginning to think about instructional planning, some major dimensions for consideration in planning are the instructional delivery, and specifically the differentiation needed as we move forward in our planning process in making sure that we provide scaffolding, changes in pacing, or feedback that's needed for students to continue forward that is differentiated based on what they need, providing that equitable learning environment. We know that instructional time is a very needed commodity in education, and often one that we do not have enough of, especially when we have varied scenarios with hybrid or fully online learning environments. So the way that we prioritize how we are using time when we are with students and have them in front of us or have face-to-face time will be of paramount importance. The materials that we select must be concise and be able to meet the purpose to reach a designated outcome for our students. And again, always considering how we are providing that positive and safe learning environment will be important in this planning process. Now, as we work through this planning process, I'm going to refer you to PDE's Data Protocol Process. And this link in this presentation, which will be provided in the note to this video, will take you to a Word document that works through this data protocol process. Now, while that title may seem a little bit overwhelming, think of this data protocol process as a prioritized instructional planning guide and walks you through the steps to help you make instructional decisions that will best meet the needs of your students and help you focus on what matters, and that's helping them learn. So again, don't let the title fool you. Let it be an opportunity to use this process to move forward. While I won't go through this page by page with you, I am going to highlight the main components of it throughout this presentation and some resources that you could use as you are completing this planning. Now, this data protocol process can be used in a short-term planning cycle where you might be planning for a coming unit or chapter of instruction, or it can be used in a much more long-term instructional component, maybe over the course of a semester or a year. We certainly encourage that you work with a teammate if possible when you are using this, so that you are creating a consistent approach to your instructional planning for all students within your school. So your first step as you begin this instructional planning process, and I often consider this almost a reflection tool as we think about the process of instructional planning, is to consider the prerequisite skills. Think about that upcoming unit, chapter, or component of study that you are planning for. What are some of the priority standards addressed in this unit that are on grade level? Please know that your state of Pennsylvania has identified some high focus standards for you to take a look at. that may help you in determining where to focus your attention in instruction as you move forward. So as an example, I'm going to use the high-level focus documents for mathematics. And again, these are high-level focus documents. This is not to say that other standards may not be important. This is simply to show that there are some areas where focus can be placed so that maximum outcomes can occur. You can jump into the grade 7 math standards to highlight these. And you will see that within this area, you will see a table that shows a focus area of instruction, as well as PA academic standards that may be focused on. Again, this is not to say that neglecting key concepts in other standard areas should be part of your instructional planning. However, these are areas where focus may be placed to gain maximum benefit. These are specific standard areas that may have a larger grouping of eligible content or may be building blocks to future learning for students. So as you see here in this math grade 7 focus, high-level focus standards page, some of the standards that may be focused on are included here. So as you think about your upcoming unit of study, you might want to compare that with the high-level focus standards so you can prioritize your timing in your planning. As we work through today and as I provide examples, I'm going to use this math grade 7 example and specifically this very first standard around analyzing proportional relationships and using them to model and solve real-world and mathematical problems. So again, our first question is, what are the priority standards addressed in this unit that are on grade level? So as I consider that unit that's right in front of me, I might refer back to that focus document. If you prefer to have those focus documents on paper, we are providing a link within this presentation to the PDF formatted priority standards. So make that comparison. Where can I place some priority and where might I place an emphasis of time? The other piece I might want to know is what are some of the prerequisite skills and content that may have come from the year before the student should be knowing when they come in to be able to handle these standards. Knowing that there was a disruption in the educational cycle during the spring of 2020, it might be important that we determine if our students have mastered those prerequisite skills in order to be able to move forward. A great way to check in on those prerequisite skills will be to use the vertical viewer within our SAS portal. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Again, I'm going to start with that focus on this one specific focus standard for math grade 7, this 217D1. So I'm going to go to my SAS portal, and you'll see that's at pdesas.org. And when I work in my SAS portal, I always make sure that I am logged in. There are certain things in our SAS portal that are only available to us when we are logged in. So up in the right-hand corner, make sure that you log into the SAS portal. And like I said, in order to determine some of those prerequisite skills, I'm going to use the vertical viewer, which we can find under the Standards tab and clicking on Vertical Viewer. Now, again, I am focusing on a 7th grade math standard. And again, this is standard 217. That one tells me that it is the very first category, the numbers and operations category. And as I look at my vertical viewer, what I will see here is that grade 7 is in the center of my vertical viewer. This will show me the grade 7 standards in the middle, but then it'll also show me around the outside the grade 6 and 8 standards. So when I get to my grade 7 standards, if there is a prerequisite standard in grade 6, I'll be able to see that. I'll also be able to see the grade 8 standards so that I'll know what things come next or what things might come after my standard. So I'm going to go and find that 217D1, which is right here, under ratios and proportional relationships, analyze proportional relationships and use them to model and solve real world and mathematical problems. And I can see that in 6th grade, there is a prerequisite skill around understanding ratio concepts and using ratio reasoning to solve these problems. I can even go back further if I need to see if there are additional prerequisite standards. So I see that there is a 6th grade prerequisite standard as well. So again, I might want to find out what are those prerequisite skills and determine if my students have any knowledge or have any background in those prerequisite skills. So that leads me to the question, that is, what trends or data exist regarding any unfinished learning? Are my students ready to enter the 7th grade standard, or might they need a little bit more help? Do I have any assessment data to help me tell that? Do I have diagnostic assessment data? When you look at that data protocol from PDE, you'll see that it refers very often to the classroom diagnostic tools and a way to use them to get to this data. If you happen to use those, that's certainly one form of assessment data. Or maybe you have some other form of assessment data that you can refer to about your students in order to get to that information. Maybe we can start with some PVOS projections. And again, when we're in our PVOS website, we might want to log in and check those projections to see which of my students are going to be most ready to enter grade level content and are projecting more likely to show proficiency through a normal course of instruction, meaning just staying within grade level content, and which of my students might not have that high likelihood of reaching proficiency with just normal instruction, that they might need some additional scaffolding or remediation. So again, PVOS might be a great site to move to. Do I have benchmarks that I use? Maybe Study Island is a tool that we use in our school district, and I can get some data from those benchmarks about the specific standard that I'm looking at or the prerequisite standards that are there. Or maybe I have some locally created assessments. So the first places to go is, what do I already have? Is there something that already exists that I can lean on and use that to determine if I notice anything about the prerequisite skills? If I do have a benchmark and I can see in that benchmark that many students are not showing that they understand this skill yet, that may tell me that they might need a little bit of remediation or scaffolding in order to be able to enter into that skill and be able to move forward. Or maybe I find out from that benchmark or a diagnostic test that students are 2 grade levels behind and I really need to move back. So again, it's important to take a look at what do I already have in existence that I can use to help me begin to determine what my next step should be and how to best prioritize my instructional time. Now, if I don't have a lot of data, I might need to determine what sort of assessments I need to use to get that data. And that might mean I'm using a benchmark or a summative assessment. I'm applying one now. Maybe I'm going to add a diagnostic assessment. Remember, the classroom diagnostic tools does not have to be a full assessment. It could be done in diagnostic categories. Or maybe I build my own formative or diagnostic assessment. And one way to do that would be to use the SAS Assessment Builder. I'm going to again jump in and show you how to use that and create that right now. So if I don't have a data set and I want to learn quickly, I might just give my kids a quick pretest on the actual standard area that we're looking at, as well as some prerequisites so that I can determine how far back I might need to go with my students. We can make this short and quick. So from my vertical viewer, I'm going to stick with that same standard. And first I want to find out if I can pose some questions to my students on grade level. Are they able to answer them well? So I'm going to click on that standard in the vertical viewer. You'll see that it takes me to the full standard as well as breaking down the assessment anchors. And I can go through anchor by anchor to find assessment questions. Again, it is required that you're signed into SAS in order to be able to access the assessment builder. That's an important concept here. Or I can just start from the standard level itself and click on the word assessments. And provided I'm logged in, it's going to take me to a series of assessment questions that are aligned specifically to this standard. So you'll see here, I found some 7th grade math questions that maybe have come from previous item samplers or previous tests that we could use to determine our students' understanding on grade level. So I might choose several of these questions, and I see one here on ratio of students. So I'm going to add that question. Another one about graphing in relationship to ratio and proportion. I see one here with this, with a table. So I might add that one as well. And I can continue going through and selecting different questions. And I want to be cognizant of the number, because we might want to make this a quick check or a quick check for understanding to make sure that we know what our students already know. Now, I've done a nice job of collecting questions that are part of the 7th grade standard set, but I might want to also go back to my vertical viewer for that 7th grade math under numbers and operations. And I might want to do the same thing, but find some questions that are about that prerequisite skill. So I went back and selected the 6th grade standard, that is the prerequisite skill. And I'm going to see if I can find some questions that help align as well. And you'll see here, it's going to ask me, I already have some items in my cart, meaning the questions I already selected. I'm going to leave them there, but I'm going to add some new questions as well. So I see another question, a 6th grade question. It also has to do with this sort of tabling idea. I want to see if I can kind of include that one. I might include this question about ratio. I might include another question that has some percentage in it. Again, just a few different items so I can get a sense if my students understand this skill at a 6th grade level and are ready to enter the 7th grade level, or maybe they don't even understand it at a 6th grade level and I have to start my scaffolding there. So now that I've built this quiz, you can see that I have 8 items in my assessment. I can hit that view my assessment where I have a student version, a teacher version, and an answer key here. You'll see that in the teacher version and in the answer key, the standards are highlighted for you so that you will be able to align them. Are they the 7th grade or the 6th grade standards? Now, in any of these versions, you'll see that you can rearrange them so that you can move them around if you need to on the quiz or test. And then you'll have the option to save this assessment, which I always suggest that you save it. It'll save within your SAS tools. You can export it as a PDF or as a Word file so that you can then print it and deliver it to students. Maybe you're going to copy and paste the questions and choices into a quiz tool that is part of your learning management system. Any of those are possibilities. So for now, I'm going to export to PDF just so that you can see what this looks like so that you can deliver it to students. So it creates a nice clean PDF with the questions for students. Okay. So by using a pretest like this, I can determine what areas of need my students might have. Are they ready to jump into grade level content? Or might they have some gaps that we need to remediate before we move forward? Now, with a quiz like this, with a little pretest, we can determine, do we want to give this to the whole class, or do we maybe only want to give it to specific students, those that maybe, if I use my PVOS projections, maybe those that aren't projected to end up on proficiency or advanced would be a good way to select specific students if I want to do it that way. Now, when I receive the results of that data, whether it's from a new assessment set that I've created to learn about my students, or one that I've had from previous, whether it be a benchmark exam, a diagnostic exam that was given early in the year, I now need to determine and start analyzing, how does this information impact my scope of instruction? So are my students ready to jump right in and I can move forward with the typical instruction at their current grade level? Or might I need to broaden that and provide some scaffolding to help them be more ready? Do I need to differentiate and group students differently so that those that are ready to move forward can move forward, and those that need a little bit of extra support can get that extra support in targeted instruction groups? Might I need to change some sequencing and take a look at the normal pattern of instruction that may be coming forward and use that pattern and adjust that pattern slightly so that I can put maybe some things in different places that it'll help it scaffold better for all students. So there are a lot of different things that we might determine. Maybe my students perform really, really well on this, and that might mean, hey, I can pace this a little bit faster, or maybe I need to pace a little bit slower so that my timing is better. So a lot of analysis needs to be done to make your instructional decisions. One key instructional decision that you are likely to make based on the results is maybe you're going to use that data to develop grouping. And some suggestions that we might offer for grouping for your students to help better meet their needs and provide equitable learning environments is find those students with unfinished learning, below grade level skill needs, meaning you offer those questions at the grade level and at the grade level below, and students still weren't getting any of them right. They definitely need some additional supports. In which case, we want to put those students all together in one group so that some targeted instruction and resources that can be devoted to those students. Maybe those students that were able to answer well those sixth grade questions, but still struggled on the seventh grade questions, are ready to jump right into grade level content. So that might be the group that gets your typical instruction that would help introduce the new concept as well as get them their additional practice. And then finally, you might have another group that was great at everything. They were able to answer all of these questions. They showed some competency and are ready for some deepening understanding. You want to give them some more application materials, depth of knowledge levels 3 or 4, or maybe some above grade level content in an enrichment format. So you might group into 3 groups, or you might see some differentiation within those groups. So you want to make sure that you're considering what kind of results you have from the data that you have in order to inform your grouping. And then again, what we're going to do is begin our planning for those different subgroups. And to do that, we want to make sure that we have opportunities when students are working together. What are the things that you're doing together that will help all students move in a similar format and stay on grade level? What additional materials or resources might need to be put into place for each of the groups so that they have the materials and resources they need to access the content and stay within grade level as much as possible? And what resources do you have that are available to you? As a middle school teacher, you may find that you might need elementary resources that aren't available to you. And we want to make sure that you know that there are some resources there that are suggested by our Pennsylvania Department of Education. I'll select here for you. And this will take you into some resources that are provided to help in that area. You'll see specifically here under the remote learning resources, there are a lot of great online resources aligned by different subject areas. You may also find that using lessons and materials from our SAS portal can be very helpful as well. Remember that as you look at those resources, you may find lessons or units of study. And as you dig deeper into those lessons and units, you may find specific activities that can be really helpful in continuing students' progressions forward. So we certainly want you to think about the different tools and resources that you have, and even use an evaluation tool to make sure that the resources you're using are meeting the objectives and the outcomes that you're expecting. Now, once we've done all of this planning, and you'll see from that data protocol process, there's a lot of great areas for you to segregate groups, name those students that should be in different groups, and provide plans and resources to help you along your way. Now it's time to deliver that quality instruction. Get it moving. Use a cycle where you are doing whole group instruction, or a rotational model where students are working in their small groups and the teacher is working with each group in different formats and providing different activities to help students continue their progress in the most effective way. As you are delivering that instruction, you're certainly going to be using those formative assessments, those quick check-ins, to see if students are progressing as you expect them to, or if they might need a little additional help, or if maybe you need to make adjustments even in their groups. You start noticing that some students that maybe had struggled on that pre-test are now showing that they're catching up and be able to move forward really quickly. You might adjust their grouping in that way. And again, you might find places where you need to supplement with resources or time to help students get to the next level. From there, we want to make sure we evaluate the impact. So you've created that pretest. Maybe you want to duplicate that pretest and let students retry it as a post-test to see if they've shown growth. That would be a great quick way to determine had the instructional plan you created worked. Make sure that you are also sharing those results, not only with your students to show them the growth that they are making, but also within your grade level or subject area teams. It's going to be really important that across your school system, there is more communication about how students are progressing as they move forward. And use that information that you're gathering from the end impact to determine if additional gaps exist and need to be addressed and might impact your next plan for instruction, your next cycle of instruction. So a lot of pieces put together, and I know that sounds like a long process, but many of these pieces, once you start putting them together, can be done fairly quickly and be part of your instructional planning process, and maybe are much more valuable now that we know that some of these gaps might still exist, or some needs are still urgent for our students. And we know that those are going to continue not just as during this 2021 school year, but as we move into the 21-22 school year as well. We want to make sure that we're continuing to make considerations for some of those disruptions in education that may have occurred as a result of our pandemic. So a couple of additional considerations for your planning and instructional delivery. First and foremost, we've learned from a number of studies that the learning loss in math tends to be much greater than that in ELA. So, thinking about your timing and your pacing, it may be important that our math teachers are considering that in a different way than our ELA teachers are, and how they are maybe devoting additional resources, devoting additional materials. Classrooms are already full with students that have large achievement span levels. So prior to our pandemic, we knew that we had students that were within a large spectrum of how far apart they were in their learning. And that may be exaggerated or emphasized now. We may see even greater spans of achievement within our classrooms. So it's important that we are making considerations for that and differentiating for that as much as possible. Above all, as we move beyond this, as we think about the content that we're providing, above that content, it's going to be really important that we start thinking about social and emotional wellness and how that social and emotional wellness impacts learning for students. So developing those strong supportive relationships for our students is going to help keep them engaged, keep them learning, and help them show resiliency skills. So as teachers, as we're in different environments, it's going to be really important that we work as hard as we can to continue to build and develop relationships with our students in any ways that we can so that they remain engaged with their content and their learning. We also want to make sure that we are using successful evidence-based strategies. Students that are really struggling really may need more individualized tutoring, and that's going to be a much more effective strategy than having them in a small group in some cases. We know even that in some cases there are needs for small group acceleration academies as we start thinking about moving beyond the 2021 school year. Does that mean some students might need to develop into different course models as they move forward? Developing strong norms and routines with social emotional learning interventions are tremendously important at this time. Going beyond the content itself and thinking about that social emotional learning need for our students is going to be tremendously important, because keeping them engaged, keeping them on top of their studies is going to be so vital in that learning progression. And keep track of those students. Make sure that we are keeping data at the forefront. As much as we know that we don't want to overtest students, we still need to know if something is going wrong or something is changing dramatically for them. So we want to make sure that we have those systems in place that we can identify that quickly and easily for our students. So hopefully this presentation today was helpful to you in thinking about that instructional planning and delivery, gave you some major considerations and resources. This presentation will be linked inside of the description of the video on YouTube. So I ask you to use it as you need. Let us know if you have additional questions or needs for additional resources, or any assistance in that analysis or interpretation to help you move forward with your planning for your students. Thank you very much and have a great day.